That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, here we are on Radiothon Day. Do want to remind people again, we are in, as you just heard, the 10 Equip Hour now and for the next hour as well. So please, if you haven't already made that phone call, do it now. Make your donation today to the Montreal Children's Hospital. We'll announce our total for the day coming up at 7 o'clock tonight. But first, Jim, let's talk about this story. People may have heard by now, Lucien Bouchard, former, of course, premier, former leader of the PQ, reaching out to his successor, Paul St-Pierre Plamondon, and suggesting, you know what, maybe this idea of a referendum is something you want to cool the jets on. What do you think of this?
Well, listen, it's very interesting. And first of all, I just want to say, and once again, because, I do my spot when these radiothons are going on. And, once again, my hat's off to Bell Media and CJAD for all the work that they're doing. And yet we cannot ignore the fact that in this, this health system, we do have to have radiothons like this. We do have to have fundraisers like this because there simply isn't enough money around, because perhaps the idea of priorities has become somewhat skewed. And it's funny that we're talking about Lucien Bouchard. Yes, he was Premier of Quebec. Yes, he was the closest this province ever had to having a political secular saint. Indeed, some observers once would refer to him as Saint Lucien, because whatever he said was the law. It came down from Mount Sinai on tablets. But the fact of the matter is, Lucien Bouchard decided to leave the PQ, and he, in fact, 10 years after the referendum, he was part of something called les Lucides. 10 people, high-profile Quebecers, and not just fake kids, who turned around and said, we can't go on the way we're going on. We've got, whether you want to go with sovereignty or whatever, you've got to deal with the real world. You should be training Quebecers. You should be teaching Quebecers to speak other languages. And he suddenly became, Lucien Lucide, the guy who the scales fell from his eyes on the way to Damascus, and he suddenly saw the real world. No one listened to a word he said. So I'm not entirely sure, Aaron, anyone can listen to what he has to say now. And with all due respect to Maître Bouchard, the idea that holding a referendum, or the threat of holding a referendum, is handing a giant electoral club to the Quebec Liberal Party, well, you and I were talking about that a few days ago. I didn't see us making headlines. But all that said, it's kind of interesting. The optics are not grand. I have not seen any response from Monsieur St-Pierre Plamondon. But all that said, I've always maintained that there, as I say, it's a tradition in the PQ. You talk big about a referendum, but the closer you get to voting day, you find all kinds of ways. Either, the dog ate my referendum question, or I have to wash my hair that day. Whatever it is, we end up not having the referendum held at that very moment in time. And unless those numbers improve, Aaron, and I see no way, especially now as we get closer to a provincial election in October of next year, that will be held, I'm sure, I hate to say it, but will still be held in the shadow of Donald Trump and his mad musings south of the border. I don't see how Paul St-Pierre Plamondon, even if he wants to be the biggest Boy Scout on earth, can follow through on this promise and still expect to be Premier of Quebec.
It's funny, Jim. I took the message from Lucien Bouchard to mean that he's saying to PSPP, you know what, you have a chance to win this, don't mess it up.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is it. This is a guy who saw what happened with the 95 referendum. He, sovereignty had hit its high water mark. Where do you go with it? What do you do with it? But the problem is, if you are not prepared, in your quest to be a nation, if you're not prepared to make sacrifices, if you're not prepared to get away, and you and I have talked about this literally for years, but, survey after survey shows Quebecers are the most vociferous in Canada for wanting increased public services, and government should take a greater role in providing public services, and they are also equally loud and obnoxious when it comes to having to pay for it. We don't want to pay taxes. So there's your problem right there. And that, to a certain extent, is the dysfunctional Quebec model, which, as Monsieur Bouchard said back in 2005, this is what is holding us back. We do not want to take a step away from this dogmatic line that we have adopted. And as long as we maintain on that course, we're doomed to have this Groundhog Day political situation. And guess what? He was right then. He's right now. Will Monsieur St-Pierre Plamondon listen to what he has to say? Probably not. Or maybe in the finest tradition of Quebec politicians, Aaron, he's going to take a look at the polls and see which way he should go between now and Election Day.
Do we make anything, Jim, of the fact that he has not said or not reacted to what Lucien Bouchard said?
I think he's trying to wait for the dust to settle. Remember, this is he's very good, and that's why he's very popular. He's very cool, calm, and collected. The guy does not deal with how can I put it, the unexpected very well. If you confront him with a new situation that he's not ready for, he will tend to perhaps speak too much or speak the wrong way, and that may account for today's silence or his apparent silence. Once again, I've seen nothing. But maybe they're just going to wait and see how this gets sunk in with the rest of the media before they I mean, he's under no obligation to reply to this. Lucien Bouchard, for all intents and purposes, is now a private citizen. So the fact that, you and I said the same thing a few days before, maybe Lucien Bouchard's words will be given the same weight as ours. But all that said, my friend, we are becoming increasingly aware, and I'm sure Monsieur Paul St-Pierre Plamondon is also becoming aware, that you have painted yourself into a corner using your tongue as a brush.
Meanwhile, over at the Gallant Commission, is there anybody who has not necessarily yet been named to testify here? It's like pick a minister, any minister.
You and I would have this running joke. But today it was François Bernardel, who's now the Minister of Public Security. The fact when at the era they're looking at you as the transport minister. And so help me God, he has very shamelessly invoked the Sergeant Schultz defense. He knew nothing. He saw nothing. It's as simple as that. They didn't give me the full picture. I was not fully aware, this and that, blah, blah, blah. What's becoming clearly apparent to Mr. Justice Gallant, who's presiding over this inquiry, however, is that somebody somewhere made a very deliberate, and up until the Auditor General's report, successful attempt to conceal the cost overruns and bungling that led to the disaster that we now refer to as SACLIT, the attempt to take the operations of the SAAQ and put them online. The extent of this, the severity of this, and how can I put it, the amount of duplicity that was involved in keeping this information from elected officials has yet to be clearly established. But with each passing day, and tomorrow we get to hear from current Transport Minister Janet Guilbeault, but with each passing day, Aaron, the stink gets worse and worse on this, and on top of everything else, this is yet another pile of manure that Francois Legault finds himself sliding through in the space of a single week.
Jim, before I let you go, I just want you to weigh in on the story that I heard this morning. Do you hear that the SAQ now is going to have to ditch $300,000 worth of American booze because it's going to go bad? What's going to happen here?
Well, I don't know. Is there a charity we could give it away to? Is there some charity where you could win, have a raffle or do something? Maybe I'm thinking small time, or maybe too big time, too imaginative. $300,000. Why don't you have? You want to run? You're running a huge deficit there, Monsieur Legault. Why don't you have a raffle? Even have a raffle inside the government. Okay. Yeah. Just have the MNAs buy raffle tickets and see if they can get all those bottles of Jim Beam and. Whatever else U.S. booze that's been sitting there. But no, they've got to make their symbolic gesture and just, I guess, pour it down the drain.
I don't know. It just seems to me so funny. We always say just because it's the best before doesn't mean it's bad, right? It's just a suggestion that it would have been better if you had it sooner. I'm sure a lot of people would be very happy to take this off their hands.
Especially when it's booze.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't ask me how I know. But all that said, and maybe there's people at the SAQ, or there's some Quebecers out there, who are out there, and they're just going to be, crying tears of blood when they see that stuff getting poured down. But let me tell you something, folks. Before we go, they've been doing the same thing with milk and eggs in Quebec for years. So never mind the U.S. booze.
James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Matt.